And yeah, we're live. So hi, I'm Annie Williams. I'm a senior at Duke, and we're so excited to have Sydney Palumbo join us tonight. Sydney is a recent graduate and software engineer, or Duke graduate and software engineer at Smartcar. For the live portion of this event, we're going to do a moderated Q&A with some time for questions at the end. Before we get started, I'd love to give some background on Sydney. She's a developer experience engineer at Smartcar. She joined Smartcar's team last year as the first female member of the engineering team and as the 10th hire at the fast-growing startup. At Smartcar, she's had the opportunity to work on the entire software experience, UI/UX design, product, and engineering. Sydney graduated from Duke last year with a bachelor's in computer science and a minor in finance. During her time as an undergrad, she interned at Fanatics as a front-end software engineer and worked with the design and data service teams while developing Android apps and working on Snapchat filter graphics in her free time. At Duke, Sydney was involved in Campus Enterprises, Duke Technology Scholars, Duke Organization for Business-Oriented Women, the First Year Advisory Council, and she was one of Duke Economics teaching assistants. So clearly, Sydney's had a very impressive career, so I'd love to dive in with some questions we have for you.
Awesome. Sounds good.
So first of all, how has the transition been since studying computer science here at Duke to becoming a software engineer at a company? Specifically, what's your biggest challenge in the transition?
For sure. So I think that I was really excited about the idea of working at a startup when I was still at school. And so it was something that more than anything I was excited for, more than nervous. But I think that no matter when you start a new engineering job, like whether it's a big company or a small company or what kind of role that specifically is, just learning the new tech stack can be a little daunting at first. You really have to take from going from like a CS undergraduate program, you really have to take the foundations and the fundamentals that you've learned of computer science into like an applied real world application and learning how to build in a production level environment and that kind of thing. So I think that no matter what the company is, starting any new kind of engineering role can be a little bit stressful because no one setup is the same. People will be using different kinds of tools and things that you've never used before. So I think that can always be a bit of a learning curve when you're starting. But I think having said that, going into a startup, this feeling for me was just a little bit amplified because you're just kind of thrown into things. There's so many new projects that like need to be done because the team is so small and there's so many projects that need to take place in order to get the product where you want it to be. So you kind of feel a little bit of this pressure to learn super quickly. And the team really needs you to be able to pick things up quickly too. But that's kind of what's the cool thing about being at a startup. And even though it was a little bit daunting at first, I think it's what's made it the most fun because it's kind of like pushes you and forced you to learn at a rate faster than you thought maybe you could. But I think like with that, there's also like a lot of ownership that comes with being at a startup because you are like thrown into these big projects. You really get to take ownership of new initiatives, and you have a lot of responsibility, which can be scary, but I think at the same time like forces you to grow the most. So I think that because like for any engineering job, really, getting the hang of a new stack is tricky, but at a startup that can be a little bit more scary than it might in a usual setting, but definitely high reward in my opinion.
Yeah, the startup environment seems super exciting. So I'm glad you've enjoyed that and been able to, make that transition really smoothly.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next question we have for you, there's typically a lot of fear about going into a small startup because of the risks associated with it. So what made you choose a small startup as opposed to going to a larger, more established company at Fanatics where you previously interned? What was your thought process behind that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good question because I think at Duke and other colleges in general in the US, there can be a lot of pressure when you graduate to go to kind of like a big name company, no matter what space you're in, tech or finance or consulting or whatever it is. But especially in tech, I think you want to be able to graduate, being able to say, oh, I'm going to this awesome company and have everyone know what it is. And that comes with like a lot of validation for you. And I think there's pressure to be able to go into a company like that right out of graduation. But I think there's really like less risk than people would lead you to believe into going to a startup. Um, like for me personally, I've always been really interested in entrepreneurship. I like did campus enterprises on campus, in which I didn't really do any technical roles or projects. It was really more of like an operational thing. But I've always kind of had that interest, and I minored in finance also. And before I decided on computer science, I thought I might major in economics. So I've always kind of had that interest too, and not just like the technical side of a company, but how that ties into like what makes a company really successful. So like what you're doing on the engineering side, and how that can most impact the business outcomes for the company. So that's really what like drew me to a startup overall. But I think that um, as long as you do your due diligence on a startup before you go, and like all the factors that you would typically think of, like who are the investors, um, how much runway do they have left, is it comparable to other offers that I might get? Those things are, of course, are super important, but I think that as long as you take those into account, you really have so little to lose when you're coming right out of graduation, because it's a perfect time to try something new, to learn a lot really quickly, and you really don't have any like major prior career commitments that would make it a huge jump. Um, so I think like coming out of school, it's really less of a risk than Duke or college might lead you to believe. Um, so I think just like being able to kind of take a jump and try something new, even though it's not like what everybody else is doing at school, can definitely be super hard, but I think worth it in the long run, because you just like learn so quickly, and that's really what drew me to it. But on top of that, you really get to see like what's happening in the entire company. So not just like what's happening on the engineering side, but because we're only a team of about 15 to 20 people, you really know what like everyone's working on all the time, and you get to see how all the pieces of everything like fit together, which is something that I love like the most about being in a startup, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Seems like such a self-starter environment that you kind of get thrown into everything, and a great place to start your career, and you'll learn how the industry works. So
Yeah,
that's exciting.
and I think if you have
Um,
multiple interests and you don't exactly know like what you want your main focus to be like your entire career, like say you're really interested in engineering now, but maybe you want to get into product, or maybe you want to get into design or something like that, that really gives you a window to see more about like what does that role specifically do, which is cool too.
awesome. So within this startup, how would you describe your experience being the 10th member of an all-male engineering team? Do you think this relates to like, overall gender divide in the tech industry?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think that like I'm just gonna start this by saying I think I've been like super lucky with the team that I have at Smartcar. Everyone is like incredibly supportive, and really like has always made it known to me that diversity and like equality on the team is something that was really important to them. Um, and prior to me joining, there was previously a female engineer on the team, and then now there's two other ones. Also another Duke grad, which is super exciting. But yeah, so I think that like when I started for about a half of a year, I was the only female engineer on the team, and um, I think that this kind of as a new junior female engineer, being the only one on the team can kind of make you feel like you're a little bit different, and you're already a little nervous about how quickly will I pick this up. I'm already different from the team, and then I'm new, but also on top of that, I'm the only woman. So I think that it can kind of more than anything, just like build on that imposter syndrome that you hear people talking about a lot, and make you worry whether or not that you will fit in with the team, and that you can bring what you need to bring to the table. Um, but I think you have to be able to like distinguish between what am I afraid of just because I'm new, and what am I afraid of because I'm a woman on the team. And I think like being able to think about those things and recognize that you're not expected to know everything right off the bat, and that kind of thing is really important. And I think that some of the things that the other male engineers on my team have done to really make me feel like more comfortable, and something that I think like would be helpful to look for in like any sort of manager or mentor, just like an advocate for you when you do feel like you're in the minority on the team, is someone that like really goes out of their way to like ask for your opinion, and like bring your opinion into meetings or discussion. And something that I found has been super helpful for me is even at times where I might feel like I'm afraid to voice my opinion, or I might not like have the best answer or know for sure, someone will like call on me to share. And I think that this like gives me the extra push sometimes that I need, because it can be easy to kind of sit back and like not want to express that. But I think that like in general, in the tech space, because like there is such a gender gap, not speaking directly about like my experience at this current at my current job at Smartcar, but just in general from my time at Duke and what I've like seen with myself and with other people kind of in the professional tech space. I think that often some of the really difficult things that women might deal with the gender gap and isn't necessarily like blatant sexism, but because it can be like more difficult and like less frequent that a woman might speak out and voice her engineering opinion. I think that sometimes that can be met with more dismissiveness. It can be easier to push back maybe on a softer or less common like women's opinion. Um, so I think that's like something that's like really subtle, but can also be really harmful, and that you have to look out for, because that kind of just discourages women from like sharing their opinion. So I think just like really trying to find the people who really like advocate for you sharing your voice has been something that like I've always looked for on people on my team, and I think uh, yeah, I think that's really important, and I think it's also important not to let people um, not to let people take advantage of, or maybe just like shut you down because you are younger or you are a woman. I think like being both a young and female engineer, that can kind of like double up on the fear that you have of being different in your team. So just like looking for people who are really trying to like support you and get to know like what your strengths are, and then kind of like help you share those with the rest of the team or the engineering org is something that's really important. So I think that um, even though like I feel like I've gotten super lucky with my team, there definitely are struggles that women may face in tech because of the gender gap, and it's getting much better. But I will say that yeah, you have to like look out just for like the really subtle things um, that are internal but also external, and trying to find the people on your team that really like help you come out of your shell, and encourage you to share your opinion even if someone maybe at first shuts you down.
Yeah, definitely. I think those subtleties are something that we've all dealt with in some form or another, but it sounds like you have a great support system and your team's doing a lot to kind of build your confidence and make you feel comfortable. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
for sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the different roles you've taken on while working at Smartcar, and how you have learned to manage the different hats you've had to wear?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm currently a front end engineer here. So that kind of like encompasses everything for our whole developer experience. So just to give a little background about SmartCar and like what the company does. So we're an API company for vehicles that lets developers build apps that connect to cars. So you can like send commands to cars like lock or unlock, or read data from the car, like check the location or the odometer reading without having to have any hardware in the car. So that's super cool. And we recently pivoted to be really developer facing. So we want to make sure that you can have like a full self-service experience on our platform. And so I've been working on projects like building our developer dashboard where you can configure your credentials for using the API, or things like rebuilding our homepage and building our documentation center. So since I started, there have been like a bunch of really fun projects to work on. But at the same time, along with that, since I am focused more on developer experience and we don't currently have a designer on the team, something that's been really, really cool for me is that I've been able to do almost all of the like UI UX design so far. Um, and like that's art, and like drawing and painting has always been something that I've been really interested in. And like on campus, I would make Snapchat like filters for different events and things like that. And I always thought it was going to be more of like a hobby, and didn't know exactly how I'd be able to tie that in with like my engineering background. But because like I am at a startup, and it really has like given me the opportunity to do both the design and the engineering at the same time, which I think is something that's super unique um, to the company that I'm at. And there are like very few large companies where I would like have the chance to do that. So something that's been really fun for me and like helped me grow a lot, both just like in the design and engineering sense, is the fact that I have been able to work on both of those. So that's been awesome. But I think at the same time, even like outside of your direct like engineering or design role, because it's a startup, there's constantly other things going on in the business that you need to be available to help out with. So say like there's a customer who's integrating with their API and they need help figuring out how to configure it in their application. So the business team might need to pull you in for a call for that, or you need to write like a technical blog post for our blog for the marketing department, or even just like doing technical interviews. So there's a bunch of different like parts of the company that you get to see, even being focused on engineering, which is really, really cool for me and something that like really drew me to a startup in the first place. So just like being able to get a full picture of all the different elements that go into the startup and how you can contribute and like constantly make the most impact. I think it's like a constant balance of being able to prioritize like what is most important for like the company, and like what is it that I can do right now that will have like the biggest impact on the company. But it's definitely like a lot of a learning curve of learning how to like context switch. So like going back and forth from like design to engineering sometimes is a little tricky. So just finding the right balance with like scheduling my days out and figuring out like what works best. But yeah, it's super fun and exciting, and like no day is ever the same, which is cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Your role seems pretty fluid, which I think is a fun aspect of a startup, and that's exciting that you get to just get a breadth of experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So next question, what's one experience that you've had at Duke that you think helped you prepare for your position now? Do you have a piece of advice maybe that you'd give to someone looking to pursue a career in software engineering?
Yeah, there are always like two different experiences that usually come to mind when I think about like what I did at Duke that taught me most. One I kind of mentioned a little bit, which was just working for campus enterprises. And I did when I worked for campus enterprises, I ran like the restaurants division, so they were delivering for like restaurants who were on food points. And even though like that didn't really have anything to do with like my technical experience, that was super super cool because I think it like gave me the opportunity to have like a lot more responsibility than I'd ever had before. So like the drivers who were delivering for us were relying on campus enterprises for like their salary, and just being able to balance like the interactions with the drivers, the restaurant owners, and also like the customers who are ordering. I think that was something that like helped me a lot with like working with different types of people and figuring out like what the way to approach like a different audience might be. And that's something that's like helped me a bunch being at a startup, just in terms of thinking about like how to work with like our customers, but also just like how to work with people in like different parts of our company, whether it's like business or engineering. So I think that was super helpful. But I also think from a more technical standpoint, something that I did senior year and something that I wish I had done like more throughout my whole time in college was I worked at this project at the business school that basically I worked for a professor where I had to rebuild an online grocery store, and he was doing research on how a user interacted with online grocery stores and what little UI tweaks we could do that would make them behave differently or purchase different items and things like that. So that was the first time I had really by myself like built out a whole end-to-end like application and understood from the ground up like, okay, how do I fit all these little pieces together, rather than working more on like the high level fundamentals like you might in a computer science class, or just like working on a piece of a project where you have the rest of the team to work with you. So I think like that was really helpful, just giving me the opportunity to like hack on things on the side and figure out how everything worked and like what tools I could use that I didn't know that were out there before. So I think like more than anything, something that I think would be really helpful for people looking to go into like technical roles after graduation is just like doing a lot of projects on the side and things that are like really exciting for you, because I think that that's like the best way to replicate what it's like when you're in a full-time role, because you're constantly just like applying the knowledge you have, and in school you might not always get like in classes the big like a large chance to try things out in more of like a production like application. You're really just doing smaller projects and things like that. So any chance you have to just like build a project from scratch and see how to like get different things to work and do that for something that you're really like excited about, whether it's like it could be just an app that like only you'll use, but I think that's like a really good way to get like hands-on practice.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that applies to both of our seniors here, as well as our younger people who are still looking for internships and trying to figure out what they want to do. So
yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now I'd like to open it up to our participants. If they have any questions, you all can just unmute yourselves and go for it. Thank you, Sydney, for answering all my questions.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
If anyone wants to take it away.
Hi, Sydney. Okay, so I had a question about sort of the day-to-day, like your day-to-day in your job at Smartcar, and also looking at comparing the culture of Smartcar and like a startup versus where at Fanatics, for example, where you worked before, and how you think those are different.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good question. So I guess I'll start with kind of the second one. But when I was at Fanatics, so Fanatics is the engineering team is like maybe 200 to 300 people. So it definitely wasn't like super, super large. But it was like a really comfortable environment to work in and like learn a new stack. So I had never, when I started interning there, I had never like developed in like React and done anything in the front end or anything like that before. So um, because it was a little bit bigger, it gave me like a great opportunity to like learn that from the ground up, and that was really helpful. And I think that it helped me starting like focusing on like a smaller piece of like the overall like big structure of like the entire company's like engineering architecture. Um, so I think that was really helpful, and I think uh, like focusing not like on like a smaller piece can be useful in like that sense. But I also think that that like really gave me the foundation that I needed to feel comfortable like making the bigger jump to a smaller company and feeling like okay, I might be able to like work on a larger scope of things. Something that I really wanted to do was even though I am really focused on front end now, just like getting out of only like working on like a small feature on a page, I think is something that's super cool, and gradually just trying to understand like the entire stack of like how our company's entire like architecture is built is something that I think is really different. I also think that being at a startup now and going into like more of what my day to day is like, I am kind of given the opportunity to lead projects and initiatives and go into like the product planning of that, which is something that is super cool. And I think like product and product management is something that interested me before. And I'm not sure that I would ever like fully transition into that, but having the chance to contribute into like the product planning is something that I found like super cool for my day to day, and just figure out like how I need to break down a large engineering task like into a bunch of smaller pieces and like how to actually plan out getting that done. Um, and then I think in addition to that, I like constantly have to work with people who are working on like other parts of it's not really teams because we are so small, but just like working on other projects and having to like tie those in together, whether it's somebody like building out a database for our billing architecture, or just like the auth flow for how we authenticate people's like vehicles. Seeing those things that are all not front end but directly tie into the front end has like really helped me like branch out and see like a wider range of things. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, it totally does. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, of course.
Hi, Sydney. I'm Alexa. My question for you is, where do you see yourself moving forward, like either within Smartcar, after Smartcar, like the next couple of steps like in your career?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that the cool thing about a startup, and I'm sure I've like repeated this a bunch of times, is that like you're just like constantly learning. And I think that um, I think I'll definitely stay here as long as I feel like there are a bunch of projects that like really expand like my own personal growth and like technical knowledge. But I think like being here has also made me feel much more confident that like I would want to keep going in startups, because I think that going from like what I do now, where it's like I get to see such a wide range of things, into like a smaller piece would be like harder for me. But it also is just like made me more confident in the fact that I do really enjoy like seeing the business side of things and like not being too far removed from that, because I think that like being able to see my direct impact on the company from a business perspective is something that's like super cool about being at a startup, and you feel like you can immediately see like your impact and the customers that are directly using like what you're doing. um, but I think that something that I've been like struggling a lot with recently is okay, like if I do something next, like do I have to pick product or engineering or design, because I feel so lucky to be able to do all of them right now. um, but I think just being able to move more into like development lead roles for like front end projects really gives me the opportunity to stay close to all the things that I love. But yeah, I think that like I feel really confident that at a company like this, like I could continue going on for a long time and like still be learning new things, because it's really the difference between like building new products and like maintaining them. And as long as I feel like I'm constantly like building new things and like learning new like frameworks and languages and things like that, like I think that's like really good for like my own growth, and I definitely like want to stay until then.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Sydney. Thank you so much for sharing. It's been super interesting to hear. So my question is, when you went into Smartcar, did you have goals set out for yourself, like personal or technical goals? And do you feel like you're meeting them now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that something that I was a little bit self-conscious about when I started at Smartcar was that I really did just have like a very specific knowledge from my internships, because while I think like what I learned at school with like Python and Java and some of the more fundamentals were like helpful, because what I had done so much in my internships and I felt like really was my specialty was more front end things. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't just like box myself into that, and that I like could keep learning new things, like whether it was in front end and that was just like new front end frameworks and tools I could use, or whether that was like getting deeper into the tech stack. So I think that like something that's been really important to me from an engineering standpoint since I started was that I'm just like constantly like learning new frameworks and getting a more thorough understanding of like how they all work together. I think I probably could do a little bit of a better job of like quantifying those things. But I think like forcing myself to branch out and volunteer for like projects that I haven't necessarily like worked with all the tooling for before has been something that I've like tried to do, and that's been really helpful, I think. And wherever I go next, I think being able to like bring those all to like the next project I work on and the next company I work for, I think like that's super, super useful. And then I think from like a design or product perspective, I think that like my goals for that were really just to get a better understanding of like what those roles were, because I knew that engineering was my main focus, but I wanted to kind of see maybe like down the road, did I want to go into product or did I want to go into like management or something like that? And just rather than doing that exactly right now, I've kind of just like made it a goal to get a better understanding of like what my like long-term plan would be. And I think just like being here for it's been like 8 months or so now, and just like observing what all those different roles entail has been super, super helpful. So yeah, I think like those two main things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Sydney. I was wondering what it was like transitioning from the college lifestyle to after graduation, like going from having so many like people all around you all the time to like graduating where you like go to work and then go back home and you're like, you don't really see so many people anymore. So like, is it mostly like seeing people on the weekends and after work, or what's it been like to be happy?
Yeah, that's a super good question too. So I think that like the major difference I've noticed between like being in school and being in like a full-time role is that like your day is much more set. Like you know that you're going to be at work for the first like 8 hours of the day and things like that. But at the same time, you also have like less structure in terms of like I have to get like an A in this class and I have to do this, this, and this. It's really like you setting your own personal goals for like where you want to be. So in a sense, it's like a lot more structured in terms of time, but it's like a lot less structured in terms of like what you want to get out of it, because you can really plan it, like tailor it like really specifically around like yourself and not just like around like what grades you're going to get, for example. So I think like that's super cool, and it's empowering to kind of like not have that pressure to like be one specific thing, but really figure out like what's the best fit for you. But in terms of just like the work-life balance, I think that like being in a career in engineering is like very tailored around like you. I think you can like work from home if you need to, and if you are more productive doing that, or say you're way more productive like in the morning or way more productive in the evening, like I found that like throughout the tech space in general, like most companies are super, super supportive of like you finding the like best fit that's right for you in terms of just like your working habits and style. So I think that's something that's super cool about like being in a full-time role, even though you're like really working for like a longer portion of the day than you may be at school. But I think that like you also don't necessarily have like the same like homework pressure that you did in school. So when you go home, you kind of can relax and like decompress and talk to your friends or your roommates about like their days and like how their projects are going and things like that, and really like do a lot of fun things on the weekend and not be burdened down by like work. So it's a very different like balance of time, but I think it's like really like customizable around you still, even though you kind of even though it may seem at first like you're just like working a longer day, but I think you can really like fit what you want to into it and like structure it around like your own personal working style.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have for this episode of Sheroes with Sydney Palumbo. Thank you to our participants, and Sydney, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and offer your insight on being a woman in tech. And to our viewers, if you want to learn more about Sheroes, please visit our website or email us. Both of those are linked in the description below. And thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.